And now I would like to ask Walter Menezes from School of Sanskrit Philosophy and Indic Studies at Goa University in India to present his paper that is called "Does Naturalism Confront Christianity? A Christian Philosophical Inquiry into Dual Natures via Eastern Ontologies." I will play the presentation.
Hello everyone, greetings from India and greetings from Goa University. I am Dr. Walter Menezes from the School of Sanskrit Philosophy and Indic Studies, Goa University. First of all, a word of appreciation for the organizers at Cracow University for accepting this paper for this presentation and possible publication. Thank you very much. The title of my paper is "Does Naturalism Confront Christianity? A Christian Philosophical Inquiry into the Dual Nature via Eastern Ontologies." The paper has 7 parts, and I shall straight away begin with the introduction and will carry on. The primacy of God's role in creation in the book of Genesis ensures an ecosystem between the humans and nature through a role of stewardship of humans over the nature than a blind dominion. Whereas philosophical naturalism discredits any role of divine being, some forms of naturalism are emboldened by the role of stewardship. However, modern scientific temper vitalized by much technological advancement, tend to exhibit a tendency of dominion over the nature than stewardship role. The dual nature ensures that unlike the modernity, man and the nature complement each other, and the sacredness of the divine ensures the sanctity of nature. The fact that one may find some aspects of these present in Eastern ontologies may be a sufficient indication of how successfully can Christianity face naturalism. There are several varieties of naturalism, each with distinct nuances depending on how they interpret the relation between nature, science and philosophy. Well, I straight away go to the second part, that is deciphering religious naturalism. Simply defined, religious naturalism refers to a broad family of philosophical and theological perspectives that regard nature as both exhaustive of reality and worthy of deep reverence and devotion. On the one hand, religious naturalism is a form of naturalism which stipulates that nature is metaphysically ultimate. What there is and all there is nature. There is nothing above, behind or beyond the natural. As monist naturalists are polemically anti-supernaturalistic and anti-supranaturalistic, excluding all extra-natural realms and entities from their ontological inventory. On the other hand, religious naturalists venture that living a religiously fulfilling existence on a fully naturalistic basis without supernaturalism and supranaturalism is both possible and desirable. Essentially, religious naturalism is a post-enlightenment but spiritually potent worldview that enables one to respond religiously, ethically and theologically to the perplexity, splendor and power of this world. That is, religious naturalism recognizes not only the metaphysical ultimacy of nature, but also the religious ultimacy of nature. What is easily noticeable is that term religious naturalism does not clearly fall in the domain of natural kind, like a solar system, nor a purely fictive construction like a stellar constellation. It is like a galaxy with loosely defined borders, perhaps like the ecosystem. The justification for the term religious is that attitude beliefs among religious naturalists are sufficiently analogous to attitudes and beliefs among the paradigm cases of religion that they may be called religious. This approach creates difficulty since the choice of paradigm cases of religion will vary depending upon the socio-historical context. But what we can get out of religious naturalism is that one can sensitize people that earth is the home and life support of everyone. The second benefit maybe can help attune the victims of injustice to the healing and renewing resources of the non-human world. The third benefit is can help remove the oppressive aspects of some traditional theisms and foster a spiritual approach that can be fulfilling and liberating as much as traditional theisms. And the fourth benefit can help focus on social injustice and human empowerment as well as motivate care for non-human world. Amidst all these utilities whatsoever, one should be ready to raise a more profound and philosophical question on the justification of higher order human spirits in a naturalistic way. That is, if we need to accept religious naturalism. By what means the objective events happening in the brain be transformed into subjective experiences? By what experimental processes can we demonstrate transformation of these experiences into subjective experiences? The major concern has been as how the naturalism can adequately explain the key notions such as self, subjectivity, first person perspective, moral values and free will in a naturalistic way. These phenomena are usually understood as residing outside the world accessible to science. Hence, if one has to really use these notions under the domain of naturalism, then these notions require a naturalization process. That is, these controversial notions are to be defined from an uncontroversial notion of the established sciences. Hence, naturalization of the first person perspective would mean that our subjective first personal point of view could be reduced to brain activated information processing system. The subjective first person point of view is replaced then with an objective third personal one. But the point is that, for example, when I prick a pin on the subject eye, it is not the objective third person that is crying, but the distinct first person. But no experimental data, including one's own feelings and cognitions, explain to us how they transfer themselves into first person account. Well, one may ignore by saying that the first person account is a myth and it's only epiphenomenon that is at work. But even then, epiphenomenon should be objective as it is observed and never a subjective phenomenon, because we observe epiphenomenon as an objective category. It cannot be subjective awareness emanating from the object. Apart from that, from the fact that what we experience is entirely opposite from what is happening or what we empirically deduce. Whole set of production of knowledge through cognition apertures is a mystery that naturalism would not adequately solve. This entails that whatever resemblance may we try from an ethical point of view, the larger question of meaning and purpose of ethics, goodwill, compassion do require an ontological foundation that is lacking under the framework of naturalism. That prompts the present author to look for a few schools of thought that may fall in the domain of religious naturalism of a real kind than the above disguised, wherein the word religious seems to be not exactly performing its otherwise implied function. So I come to the third portion, synchronicity of naturalism and transcendence in Sankhya thought. Religious naturalism, as discussed above, seem to have some resemblance to Sankhya thought, but without difficulties that posed above. We may be better off naming it religious naturalism of a real kind or religious naturalism A. Sankhya postulates two primordial and independent realities, namely Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is pure conscious, intelligent, attractive and unmoving, whereas Prakriti is exactly opposite, unconscious, unintelligent, attracted and moving. However, primordial Prakriti, matter, is constituted of three qualities, namely Sattva, that is brightness, Rajas, activity, Tamas, darkness. So both the principles of Purusha and Prakriti, exists independently, and the world is nothing but the result of manifestation of the primordial principles of matter through the power of consciousness. So, creation and evolution take place only with commingling of two principles. When the commingling takes place, the universe is created. Despite the fact that early Sankhya is silent on God, it postulates conscious selves. The liberation of individual selves takes place when there is discriminative knowledge of what is eternal, that is consciousness, and what is not eternal, that is manifested consciousness cum the matter. This world is manifested matter as well as manifested consciousness. While Nitya is the conscious Purusha that never undergoes change, Anitya is the manifested matter that undergoes change at the creation due to the attractiveness towards the Purusha, which is pure consciousness, which is aroused by rajas or activity, which is a constituent part of Prakriti because of the resemblance of Sattva, which is the brightness quality in the Prakriti. Individual self is nothing but the reflection of the pure consciousness, just like the mirroring. Okay, so what is there is in the Prakriti, in the matter, is nothing but the image of the pure consciousness in the matter. Because of the image of the pure consciousness in the matter, in the Prakriti, okay, in the self, then the self is activated, and it activates its manifested materialistic consciousness by which we all do our activities. So, though one may be inclined to see some similarity to Christian thought with these, the claim that I propose to make is that it is not always necessary that the matter and the spirit have to be seen as opposite to each other. However, our earlier claim still remains, that is, granted that the matter and spirit are not binaries, an occurrence of a justifiable naturalization process is indispensable for upholding doctrine of epiphenomenon. We do have a similar postulate in the Vaiseshika thought, wherein Supreme Self, God, is the organizer of innumerable and multifarious atomic particles that otherwise lack distinction to combine into and give rise to existence of any intelligible entity. Moreover, just as binary relation has been often upheld between the matter and the spirit, the substance is always seen through the binaries of change and permanence. The Jaina school of thought brings about this reconciliation. So therefore, now I quickly go to Jaina school thought, which is my fourth part, significance of reconciling binaries in Jaina school of thought. The Jaina religion and atheistic school makes a clear distinction between Jiva, self, and Ajiva, which is non-self. The self is understood as conscious, eternal, immaterial substance that is distinct from physical body and all forms of matter. The Jiva is capable of experiencing pleasure, pain, and knowledge, and it undergoes cycle of birth, death, and rebirth based on one's own karma or action. So, liberation in Jainism is the process of freeing the Jiva from enlightenment of karmic matter, leading to its pure liberated state, completely detached from the material world. While there is some primacy of naturalism, yet Jaina maintains the immaterial status of the self. Whereas classical Jainism does not uphold the notion of God, it posits multifacetedness of the reality known as Anekantavada. So, reality cannot be characterized in black and white for Jainism. It is complex. Every substance is fine balance between change and permanence. Okay, a permanent substance cannot be perceived without changing modes. Similarly, a changing substance cannot be perceived unless there is a corresponding static background. So, every motion requires a static surface. While Jaina thought can be safely listed under religious naturalism, religious naturalism A, that is religious naturalism of a real kind, its notion of substance does not provide insights into how the bizarreness of the binary concepts of thought and language are not necessarily be translated into reference. Similarly, it seems in language, naturalism and theism have been pitted against each other. However, most of the philosophies mentioned above have not translated those linguistic binaries into their efferent. One of such instances may be found in the dual nature of Christ. Christ has two natures, human and divine, both existing simultaneously like Jaina substance. The human nature of Christ could not have existed unless the divine nature was present. Similarly, the divine nature of Jesus Christ of Nazareth could not have been experienced apart from the medium of his human nature. Limiting our arguments to the scope of this article and in defense of the postulates of Christianity, it can be safely said that the divinity of Christ under his dual nature was not paradoxical to his humanity. Hence, it is perfectly fitting to speak of theism and naturalism coexisting, whereas naturalism may be content either without the spiritual or spiritual in it, and the postulation of the second option would necessarily require them to produce a justifiable explanation to the naturalization process of the higher order realities. There is no way one can pursue the spiritual without the accompaniment of the material. Hence, that surmises to say that in no contest Christianity has rejected matter and degraded it to the extent of some other traditions around the world. The fifth point that I am trying to make is the philosophical significance of dual nature. Okay, now I try to connect how the Eastern ontologies, wherein the binaries of thought exist, but in practice, in referent, they are not so difficult to deal with. There is Purusha and Prakriti, always there, matter and the spirit, so to say. So also in the case of substance in Jainism, they are always right. They exist. The motion and the permanence both, change and permanence both exist simultaneously, and that is the definition of substance for Jainism. So I am connecting those linkings to the dual nature of Christ. The philosophical significance of dual nature may be, from the perspective of Christian faith, the dual nature of Christ cannot be said to be an accident in the church history, due to the simple reason that had the material was pursued to be an hindrance towards the progress of the spiritual, God could choose Christ's revelation through a pure spiritual form such that had taken place at the event of Annunciation. The divine penetrates into the matter and can be perceived only via higher order realities. The matter is objective and no effort can convert it into the subjective. The objective is always perceived, and that requires a subject to perceive and experience. Without the existence of the subject, there is no meaning in the object, for the object does not exist, as the existing object does not render itself efficacious until it is perceived by an experiencing subject. So whereas naturalism upholds that matter can contain the spirit in its spatio-temporality, it becomes extremely clear that the matter does not exist without the higher order reality that can render the existence of matter efficacious. So the naturalist claim of giving primacy to the matter is questionable, as the recognition of very primacy of matter is grounded in the spirit. Matter can exist, it doesn't mean anything unless there is a spirit which perceives it. With these reflections, it looks extremely unlikely that matter can cause the existence of the spirit, though vice versa does offer some hope. Further, even if naturalists say that God is there in the nature, it does not mean that he is a product of the nature. It can only mean that God is not somewhere in heaven, rather he is there hovering over the material world, or is penetrated into the material realm in the sense of Christ entered the upper room of the disciples, penetrating the walls of the upper room. So that makes me to talk about the centrality of Christian thought, what actually this Christian thought would mean. So the centrality of Christian thought is summarized in God's birth into human conditions. This entails that the Old Testament attributes of God's transcendence can be applied contextually. The new message is that God is amidst his humanity. The Christ is fully divine and fully human. There is no one-sided perspective to Christ. He was friendly and compassionate to both good and evil, sinner and saints, Pharisees and tax collectors, Christians and Gentiles, and had a divine and human side. The dual nature of Christ is all about the possibilities of coexistence of the matter and spirit. Matter is transformed by spirit, and the spirit is expressed through the matter. The central theme of Christian thought is that God is neither immanent nor transcendent. Categories are human perspectives, and God is beyond all kinds of stipulations. God is divine and human at the same time. The humanness is expressed through his concrete miracles in a day-to-day life of every believer. It is not necessary to defend everything just because other traditions have a counter view. It is not necessary for Christianity to deny what the naturalists say just because they are not in agreement with primary postulates of Christian faith. As far as the naturalists are concerned, Christianity needs to produce an argument that will rescue them from a counterattack if it is worth it. However, the present author sees no reason to totally deny what naturalists are saying, as they serve as an eye-opener for some of the presuppositions that Christianity presupposed without evidence, as has been the case in the history. So in conclusion, what I would like to say is that the Christian philosophy and naturalism not necessarily to be in loggerheads. What I try to show is that religious naturalism is one which really very comes closer to the good effects of Christianity, yet it is a dangerous one because it posits God in its matter itself. And therefore, what I needed to do is I needed to see some Eastern ontologies wherein I can clearly show that matter and God can exist together in Sankhya or in Jaina philosophy, where spirit and God, they are not contradicting and there is no difficulty. And we can see this approach even in the dual nature of Christ in Christianity. Okay, and in all through the history we have seen what has happened is Christ's resurrection or Annunciation or the event of Assumption, where Mary is completely taken into body and soul to heaven. We see the element of naturalism and the spirit coming together. So what I have tried to do through this article is to say, through the help of Eastern ontologies, that Christian faith remains what it is, and it is not challenged by the advances of materialism, but of course it does give us food for thought so that our faith can be strengthened. Thank you.